They are absolutely delusional, as some wild new reports have surfaced surrounding Bo Bichette that are not only, quite frankly, ridiculous, but has continued to plague the media as the same reports every single year now, yet again this year, have emerged, but this time more delusional than ever. We'll break down what these reports are and discuss how they have some pretty big implications for the Blue Jays. But not only that, we do have some other Bo Bichette updates, some more encouraging ones, as well as a few other interesting things overall ahead of what's going to be a crazy rest of the week as meetings continue to happen in Vegas between the players and GMs. Ton to go over on this episode, folks. But before we get into it all, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be touching on something that has taken over a few of the tweets and taking over a bit of the news cycle as of late. And boy, oh boy, is it's delusional once again. And I'm going to start with this headline here. And we do have a bunch of updates to go over. But there was a new headline that dropped and had a ton of people talking about it. And I want to talk about it today because it's kind of going to show how no matter what reports actually come out, there's always going to be those that are a little bit delusional. And the Dodgers, the headline is Dodgers favored to land Bo Bichette as MLB free agency opens, also in the mix for Kyle Tucker, and he says Kyle Tucker, and Alex Bregman. And the article basically goes on to say that the Dodgers sit at plus 250 to sign Bo Bichette, the shortest odds of any team. Now, this, of course, you're probably looking at it and saying, okay, it's just an article. What's really the big deal here? Now, for one, the Dodgers are not favorites to land Bo Bichette, right? We all know that. But a report dropped from Steve Simmons, of all people. And it's a report that is a little bit ludicrous. Bichette told everyone who would listen that he wants to stay a Blue Jay as free agency opens. He wants to continue his quest with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He said publicly that he wants to obviously stay with the Jays, while quietly telling some people he wouldn't mind playing in New York in the future, the immediate future. And folks, this is where things get a little bit wild, because Bo Bichette has publicly came out and said he wants to stay with the Blue Jays. Reports have publicly said that he wants to, stay with the Blue Jays, but there's reports no matter what about Bo Bichette leaving, and it's at the point now where it's a little bit delusional, right? Because no matter what way you look at it, it's the Dodgers being favored to land Bo Bichette. It's now the Yankees. You think back to with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. What happened with Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? It's just ridiculous at this point, and I want to talk about it because, for one, this is a ridiculous report from Steve Simmons, right? It is one that from what we can tell, blatantly false. But also, like you see this here, Bichette says he wants to stay with Vladdy. I'm supposed to believe Bichette would want to go to the team Vladdy publicly hates. And that's where things get a little bit wild here. And again, they're delusional for reporting this. And it's a little bit of a wild report anyway, whether you want to say that the Dodgers are favorites, or in this case, say that he's been telling people quietly he wouldn't mind playing in New York in the future. It's wild. And the reason I bring it up is simply because we do have a bunch of other Bo Bichette updates to go over and a bunch of positive ones, but it's to remind everybody, no matter what point you're at in the offseason, there's always going to be reports, whether they're real or fake, that are just a little bit wild. And this is Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun, by the way, someone who's super involved in not necessarily baseball as much, but in general, he's just saying that behind closed doors, Bichette wants to be a Yankee, which is a little bit wild because we do have some updates surrounding Bo Bichette and his actual free agency run and his actual free agency, pursuit. Now, you can see here, early in free agency, the majority of interest in Bo Bichette is at shortstop. Other teams with incumbent shortstops have expressed interest in him at second base or third base. Now, John Morosi obviously here tweeted this because his tweet from earlier this morning was confirmed Bo Bichette has received interest from multiple teams who view him as a second baseman or third baseman due to the presence of an established shortstop on those rosters. Further evidence, the World Series augmented his value in the marketplace. So this was the report this morning, but then clearly some agent went out there and decided to send John Morosi a text and say, hey, he is viewed as a shortstop. He wants to get paid as a shortstop. So he backtracked heavily and said that the majority of interest is at shortstop. And this is super important to the Jays because if he is willing to play second base, it makes things a heck of a lot easier. Now, I'm fine if the Jays pay him as a shortstop, but I want you guys to let me know down below in the comment section. Where do you view Bo Bichette on the Toronto? Would you only sign him if he's open to playing second? Would you be fine punting some defense and putting him at short and putting Andres Jimenez at second? Because there's a lot of things that are happening here. And within all the delusion that's going on behind the scenes around the Yankees pursuing Bo, there's no world Bo Bichette goes to the Yankees. I'll tell you that right now. But that, and then you have, of course, the Dodgers, saying that their favorites to land him could sign star Bo Bichette. I am more confident than ever that the Jays are going to sign him. And this report in specific, had people pretty riled up because it's just, I mean, a wild statement to make. But at the same time, I don't necessarily blame people because if I'm a fan of the Yankees and I'm a fan of the Dodgers and I see that headline, I'm going to be pretty happy. And even though it is a little bit delusional, it's the way that free agency is. But then for John Morosi, you can see here behind the scenes, he's being told, hey, push Bo Bichette as a shortstop, not a second baseman. Because if you push him as a second baseman, you're going to be in pretty big trouble here because he's going to get paid less, right? That's kind of the in theory thing. But you can see very clearly, hey, people and teams are viewing him as a second baseman or third baseman. And then the agent texted him and said, no, it's actually shortstop. That's what we're going to say. And then boom, the majority of interest is in Bo Bichette at shortstop. So it's funny how that goes. And it's a little bit interesting, but pretty big update here. He's going to get paid as a shortstop, no matter what way you slice it. Ben Smith came out and said 5 years, $130 million. It's going to be more than that. 8 years, $200, something like that. It's going to be Willy Adames plus money, which is shortstop money. But for the Jays, if you can go ahead and actually convince him to be, hey, we'll pay you as a shortstop, but play second base, you're looking a heck of a lot better than you may have been, obviously with him at shortstop. And that's where things become very interesting for this team. Now, again, he could land at the Dodgers, he could land with all these teams. However, there was a recent article that dropped from ESPN, I believe it was, and every single insider and writer predicted that Bo Bichette, the number 3rd ranked free agent on their rankings, is going to return to the Toronto Blue Jays. And you can see here, which makes this report so ridiculous. And Steve Simmons is not a great reporter anyway, at least in my mind, no disrespect, of course, but quietly saying behind closed doors that he wants to play with the Yankees, delusion. Dodgers being favored to land Bo Bichette, even bigger delusion. But it is the Dodgers at the end of the day, and that's what's always going to happen. And they also have a typo in their article, so it is what it is there. But this was the report in particular that got me fired up. However, there is some other things. Now, of course, the Jays being favored to land Bo Bichette, there are some things here. Now, I do want to dive into this. So there was a recent report by Ken Rosenthal talking about some players that the Jays are going to be interested in, and Edwin Diaz, Devin Williams, all these guys. The Jays are expected to be among suitors for these players. Now, if you watch this far, let me know down below, do you want to see them get another closer? Because, of course, you have Edwin Diaz, Devin Williams, 2 pretty solid relievers, though Devin Williams had a pretty rough last year, decent end. The Jays are involved in every single free agent, right? They got Shane Bieber for, a discount. And you have Ken Rosenthal coming out, which is even more crazy. By the way, more delusion here, saying maybe he wanted stability, maybe he wanted some of this, but no one really knows why Shane Bieber stayed in Toronto. So Ken Rosenthal is kind of saying, and the answer is because, hey, he loves Toronto. And, a lot of frustration. A lot of these reporters just not even discounting Toronto, just blatantly disrespecting it. But it is what it is. The good news is the Jays are among suitors for some of these top-end guys. Out of these players here, Diaz, Williams, Suarez, Fairbanks, who do you want to see the Jays pursue the most? For me, Robert Suarez, easy, makes a ton of sense. You should probably go after another closer as well. And we know Ross Atkins said that Jeff Hoffman isn't in love necessarily with the closer role, or rather, Ross Atkins isn't in love with him fully being there, and he's willing to, Jeff Hoffman that is, go elsewhere and be an 8th inning guy, be a setup guy. But let me know down below what your thoughts are. And a little bit of an interesting video. Delusion's happening, and it's time to discuss it a little bit. And let me know down below if you think it's just the way that free agency is, or do you think it's at a point now where Toronto is still being disrespected? Because at the end of the day, if you get the free agent, it doesn't really matter. But these reports and this one, in specific, a little bit delusional.